Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hello and welcome to another podcast of Harvesting Wisdom. I have a guest from Colorado that I had met at the NOCO, the hemp industry conference that was in Colorado a few months back. My guest is David DiGiacomo. Giacomo. Okay. So I always bastardize a word when a name when I'm talking, but you have D-I-G, and it's really D-I, it's pronounced D-I-J. So Giacomo. Okay, I think I got it right. Yeah, I'll let you interrupt on when we come back. But what our mission here at Harvesting Wisdom is that we tell stories of individuals and organizations that embrace sustainability, climate-smart agriculture, and land management. And we feel that is a cornerstone of sustainability, and it's a cornerstone for a thriving planet and for future generations. Health for future generations. So, David, welcome to the podcast. That took me a little while on the intro. I thought I had it. I thought I had the name down, and I got it in my head, and I screwed it up. Sorry about that. But
no worries.
Anyway, I'll read off your bio a little, and obviously, let me know if any of this stuff is wrong. But David, you're a skilled, entrepreneurial-minded attorney, dedicated to assisting startups, early growth companies with their business needs, with expertise in entity formation, corporate finance, contract negotiations, compliance, investment, mergers, acquisitions, and real estate. David provides strategic counsel, practical solutions for businesses in agribusiness, health, technology sectors. He has a particular expertise in natural foods, craft brewing, cannabis, and frequently collaborates with investors in fund formation, including venture capital and angel funds. As an entrepreneur who has launched 2 startups himself, Dave is passionate about helping clients overcome legal challenges they grow. He also offers corporate counsel services in blockchain and digital technology spaces, and extensive experience with commercial contracting. Early in his career, Dave played a pivotal role in launching the Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network of Colorado. He's a frequent speaker at local bar associations and startup community events. That's a lot, and I could ask 1,000 questions just on what you did. So let me ask just a few simple things. You're in Colorado. Did you grow up there?
I did, yeah. Grew up in West Denver and have spent almost all of my life here. So.
And where did you go to school?
I went to University of Colorado at Boulder for undergrad, and came out and, as you mentioned in my bio, launched a startup. Thought I was never going to be a lawyer. I'm a sort of an entrepreneur by spirit, and had some success in founding an organic dog food company, raised capital for it, and kind of fell in love with everything I did in the deal with my lawyer on being an entrepreneur. And I said, I want to go help people as an entrepreneurial, closely held business attorney. And so I went back and did a JD MBA dual degree program at CU Boulder again, to work with startups and entrepreneurs. So that long-winded background is sort of our way of saying I work with a lot of startups. And then here at Michael Best, I also chair our cannabis practice. So I run all of our transactional work and our team that is working with entrepreneurs in the emerging cannabis industry. And that's everything from ancillary businesses to directly licensed marijuana businesses and a lot of hemp and industrial hemp clients as well.
Cool. Now, I'll get distracted because there's a million things I want to talk to you about. But starting with UC Boulder, that's a school I wanted to go to, but it never had the money. I grew up in New York, and it was like it might as well have been Harvard times 10. I could, it was 10 grand a year back then, so it wasn't in the cards for me. But I think I liked the idea of Boulder from watching Mork and Mindy, so that was my motivation maybe to go to, and looking at all the skiing, because I was a skier and stuff. So Boulder's a great environment. It's a kind of a healthy outdoors environment, and it's, I think, a fairly progressive state. A lot of connection both to the Midwest and the East as well as the West. So when I go back there, I feel like coming from Arizona, California, I feel like I'm really going back to the Midwest. When I was growing up in Buffalo, I definitely felt I was coming west. I didn't feel like that was anything like the East Coast or the Midwest. So it's really a unique place in the center of our country, right? And you got into now, Michael. The name of the company, the firm you're working with, Michael Best and Friedrich. And I was like, okay, who are those guys? And you're like, oh, they've been dead a long time. How old is that company, and what's that? Where is that located? Where you guys work?
Yeah. So Michael Best and Friedrich is a national law firm started 176 years ago.
Unbelievable.
And,
did we have a constitution that long ago?
We did.
They might have worked on it.
It's a very long time, though. They worked on some very early projects in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is where the law firm is based. 15, sort of hub offices all over the country. We tend to tie ourselves to centers of innovation and have a really strong team in the startup community as well. So we are, a full service national law firm, but the core of our work is on intellectual property and helping people develop ideas and startup ecosystem of, universities or idea creators, help them set up their business, help them grow their business the right way, and value building partnerships with people in that way. For a law firm based in the Midwest, we have that old school roots of agriculture and things in the heartland of America, right? So working with dairy producers and agriculture producers. I have a partner here who, when I first joined Michael Best 6 years ago, and was working on cannabis contracts, was talking with him, and he said, oh, I've been doing these contracts for peaches and cherries and all these farms across the Midwest.
Another commodity,
I'd love to talk
sure.
to you and collaborate on how we can, use what we're learning together on those folks. So we love helping, businesses that are producing things, making things, true sort of, Midwest type of companies. So
yeah, it's interesting because that's a really wild space, right? So I don't know. We hear the statistics, like 99 companies out of 100 fail in the first year. Emerging industries, really hard. Bottom line, it's usually the second guy that comes in that makes the money. The first guy paves the way and gets the hell kicked out of him, right? So, and I never thought of myself as a serial entrepreneur, but as it turns out, as I look back, I've invested and started so many different companies, and I don't know if it's just wonderloss or I just get suckered into these things, but I'm trying now to pare down. I've got it down to a few, but I was in the VoIP space, VoIP phone space. We had a full network based out of locally here in Scottsdale, but our main hub was in Vegas, and we had employees and a little office in Taipei, and we had launched what I thought was a superior service worldwide, but crossing that chasm, right? And people who start in business, they realize that you've a great, and it scares me because people come to me and I got a great idea. Great idea, go somewhere else. I don't want any great ideas. Give me a bankable idea. Give me one that's not so great, but that it's structured and organized. As a matter of fact, if I, by chance, am watching Shark Tank on TV, I immediately get cold sweats and heebie-jeebies. I think most of it's Hollywood to begin with, but I watch that, and it's just like reminds me of every time I had to go up and give some spiel for fundraising or something or whatever, and I turn the channel as fast as possible. So I get the excitement out of being in it, but how, for you guys, a lot of these startups don't have money, right? Very, they're undercapitalized because they're not business people. They're not legal people. Yeah. And then we know a lot fail because people don't understand what they have to do to build a company. And I don't know, I wouldn't hate to be in charge of the receivables for Michael Best and Friedrich, because I imagine, half your, a good chunk of your clients are like, well, thanks for the service, but no, we're going out of business. We can't pay you. How much of that, how do you handle all that? That's the first question I have.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, part of it is, just building the right scale for that support for people and being really transparent up front. So, when we do the initial formation work, I formed 7 companies in July.
Oh my God.
And every one of those is, here's the form version, plug in your information, let's get you set up and ready to go. And then, build that relationship, do early transparent work about what it's going to take, what it's going to cost. And then, you're absolutely right. I've seen over the years, not all of those companies are going to make it. Some of them are going to go do something else. They'll take a dream job at wherever, pick your large business. But some of them will succeed, and they will come back in 6 months and a year with their next problem, right? And I love being there to help solve that problem. Hey, we just hired 2 more people. Hey, we got to figure out our trademark and our branding. Hey, we're trying to get a patent for this specific thing. So lots of steps along that path, but for sure it's about, building that relationship, keeping it simple in the early days, and then, going along with the ones that have great success. So,
well, one thing is you are in the that ag space, and people don't realize how innovative agriculture has to be just to keep up. In industrial agriculture, everything pushed commodities to be extremely efficient. An American does not pay 1 extra penny for anything he buys in a grocery store. Everything has been processed and figured out. That's good for a consumer to a degree, but sometimes it takes boutique products that might be higher quality, and it takes them out of the marketplace, right? But one of the things I see, we all talk about buying local, but that doesn't happen all that much. And especially in an emerging market like industrial hemp. Now, sometimes you get, industrial hemp was outlawed as of, I don't know, a dozen years ago or so, before that first farm bill. And the government didn't even know how to bring it out. But I think they're coming to the realization that industrial hemp is not for CBD. It's not for THC. It's literally for the fiber, and it's for the seed that you can eat, which has no hallucinogenic or effects, that kind of thing, right? So it really truly is like growing cotton or whatever. But it had that stereotype, and lawyers had to be involved with trying to get that on a national platform. Through different farm bills and stuff like that. Are you guys working directly for entrepreneurs, or did you guys have anything to do with, like, the passage of legislation and that kind of thing with your company overall?
Yeah, I would say, most of our day-to-day is directly with entrepreneurs and helping them, but, not this last session, but the one before, we hosted the National Cannabis Industry Association at our office in DC, and have provided space for people in the industry to go and do things like lobby days, and go and be active there. We certainly have worked with, and we have a arm of Michael Best and Friedrich. We call it Michael Best Strategies. That is our government relations colleagues, and we work closely with them. And there are definitely instances where you bring the colleagues together and say, hey, how can we help this client? The Farm Bill is actively right now back on the table. There's some serious questions about whether we're going to have a zero THC hemp situation. And so helping guide those conversations is certainly a place where, government relations people can be very helpful and over the years involved for clients.
So in the past, you guys were involved with probably some of the medical or some of the legal, the states that legalized, and CBD. And we know the CBD market skyrocketed and then crashed. Because it was an early market, and people didn't realize, the benefits of it, or how to grow it, or process it, or how to use it. Not everybody is actually helped using it or helped by it. But if in certain products are more effective than others, the way they get into your bloodstream and that kind of thing. But for one reason or another, that thing has taken a little bit of a dive. And when that happens as an industry, everybody gets a little nervous. And I imagine some of your clients were some of those CBD guys that, and part of the issue was the government would come out and at time of harvest, their CBD, the THC level was too high. And it had to do with using the wrong seeds mostly, but, sometimes it has to do with climate effects, weather effects, where, it just got hot, and because of it, that CBD turned, and then, so they had to burn entire fields, which is not, something that a farmer can afford to do, right? So, now so what I'm looking, you guys can practice law. You can practice law in Colorado, but your firm is practicing law in many places in the country. So because my company, Soil Seed and Water, is in that space where we are growing seed, and that's what we want to be involved with, and to work with helping companies who are doing offtake agreements find farmers that can grow and propagate. And the seed is tricky too. Seed is very tricky. So we work with a lot of seed scientists, and that on a lot of different counts, right? But if I were to need any legal help, I'm in Arizona. Can you guys extend help nationally to other places? How does that work?
Yeah. So, each state is state by state for lawyers where you're licensed to practice law. So I am licensed to practice in Colorado, but we actually, just announced opening an office in LA. And we have, I think if you look at the map on our website, you can see all the states we're licensed in and have people in. I think it's about 34 of the 50 states we have an attorney licensed to practice there. So in a plurality of states, we can directly have somebody help. And then in a lot of instances, we can also advise and steer. And we have a partnership that we are a part of called Lex Mundi, which is an affiliate program where if we don't have somebody who's licensed in Georgia, we can go and get local counsel in Georgia through that network connection and bring them in as part of our team.
And use all of that IT or that IP, intellectual property, that you've developed over the years to help guide people to not make major. I think in business, it's you make 100 mistakes, and one of those mistakes turns out to be fortuitous, and that's the only way anyone survives in business, right? It's never like the thing you think you're going to do goes right. It's like all the things that go wrong, and then one of those turns out to have a a profit mode. But so if we
Looking
needed
like a
some,
true entrepreneur.
what's that? Yeah,
You are a true entrepreneur
yeah,
there,
you're
Mike.
used to getting kicked in the head all the time, right? But
Yeah,
so
keep trying and keep innovating is the key, and
that's
especially
the
in
deal.
this world.
But we're talking about an industry that has to rise together, because an infrastructure has to be built for it. Offtake uses of the products they're emerging, but a big problem is getting enough seed to grow and getting the right
Yeah.
seed to grow. Because
Yeah.
if you're committing 10,000 or 100,000 acres, and you use a seed or you plant it at the wrong time or you don't have the equipment to use to do it, that's a disaster. That's a one-time disaster, and there's no recovery from it, right? And we've seen that it can happen in the CBD space, right? So what are you seeing in the industry right now that is encouraging? I think we both were in NOCO, and for all the people I know who are in the space over the last 5-10 years, it became kind of depressing, but I think everybody had a lot of positive energy coming out of NOCO. Did you see it that way too?
Yeah, I do. I think it can be tough with some of the headwinds of an emerging industry, and you're building a startup, and your industry is also new. And so some of that uncertainty of what is the pipeline, how are we selling products? If you're going to make fiber, how do you develop that? I have a client, who was one of the pitches at the NOCO hemp pitch event that we sponsored at this last festival. They're creating a machine to help with decortication, right? And
yeah, we do that.
as you think about it, yeah, you're building not only the infrastructure to harvest and bring final product to, you're also trying to build the customer who's going to buy that. And so there will be strikes and gutters in that, if you will. I think on balance, there's a ton of positive news. We've made a lot of progress. We're starting to see more hemp fiber, more hemp construction materials, use cases beyond CBD that start to make sense. And you look at, large industrial players who are saying we have to source plastics, we have to source fiber and pulp for bags and cardboard boxes for Amazon and Walmart, right? These large players who say we have to have sustainability be a part of this. Hemp is so well positioned to be a part of that solution. And I definitely see clients having really interesting conversations in bioplastics and other products. So.
There's so many different uses for it. Once you get in the space, you just get amazed by how amazing, how great it is, and how it answers a lot of our problems, right? Our cotton industry in the U.S. has been shrinking. Cotton gins have been moving overseas. We've lost a lot of our textile. When we listen to political rhetoric about, the country and our well-being and our financial security and our national defense, right? All of those things. And the solution is really, in my mind, obviously you still need a strong military in some places, but building guns is not as critical as saving our industries here in the States. And that doesn't mean we're not a world player, but when you're losing the ability to grow stuff or, the ability to make your own products in the state, I think that is a national security crisis that we have. And I don't think the government is built for looking at long-term solutions to what we need in the country. And I think the USDA, it's a big body. It gets, you see it going in the right direction mostly, but, getting pulled back by some archaic people and archaic ideas. But I think hemp not only is a solution for business, which obviously to be a sustainable product, it has to be a product that's got a huge demand. And I don't see a product that has a bigger demand than hemp out there, right? But it's not only got to be financially viable. It is actually a better crop to grow. It uses less water. It remediates
Yep.
the soil. It pulls up metals and that kind of thing. But it'll break. It'll grow down as much as a couple of meters, 2.5 meters. So it'll break up hard pan. It'll allow nutrients to drop, and it it's just this amazing product. But
It really
you know,
is. Yeah.
it's a hard thing. So when you get people calling you up, and you've probably seen people jump into the space, and do you kind of give them a little bit of warning advice too, like saying, "Hey, I've helped 5 guys just like you, and I saw them just take their life savings and get in trouble. And hey, have you thought of this and thought of that? Have you where do you go
Yeah.
with the advice, right?"
I do, I have those conversations sometimes. I'd say more often than not, like, a farmer, they have already seen that, right? They've seen enough of it from the CBD boom to understand, and folks are a little wary. Hey, what am I planting? What am I getting into? How do I deal with it? A lot of my calls are, how do I deal with the regulatory? How do I deal with the risk on if I get hot product? How do I deal with, I had someone call me in Wisconsin recently and say, hey, I'm dealing with wanting to grow and produce hemp products in this county. What does that look like? What does the county look like? And it gets down to really granular, like, how do I manage? Who do I call? I can a lot of times be a really helpful resource on, we've dealt with those several people, or, what are the rules for selling, hemp products in Colorado or Arizona or California. So, yeah.
Yeah. So these are the legal challenges. Where do you see the greatest legal challenges now? Now, you talked about the Farm Bill, and you talked about your dog food company. So one of the biggest things that anybody in the space knows is that hemp seed is a superfood. I've been eating it for 20 years. It comes out of Canada. So we give our northern brothers $2 billion worth of, and Canada is a great place to grow because of sunlight, how many sunlight hours. But we should be able to grow our stuff for ourselves, and it is a superfood. But it really belongs, in my mind, it really belongs in animal foods, animal feeds, whether it's chicken, cow, horses, everything. But I think their talk about the Farm Bill allowing that to happen right now, there's regulation problems with that, right? So,
Yeah.
how much of that do you end up getting involved with?
I would say also I've been eating hemp food for many years, and I'm a supporter. I have a hemp powder in my smoothie pretty regularly, and it's amazing. It's a great superfood, high in fiber
And protein. It's a big protein.
Yeah, and protein. It's such a good whole food to put in that smoothie in the morning. For me, it's awesome. So,
So
but
why
I
can't
think
why can't we feed a chicken? If we feed
why
ourselves?
can't we feed a
It
chicken?
makes no sense, right?
It does make no sense. I mean, I think honestly, it's a lot of education for the people making those decisions, and unfortunately, as an emerging industry, folks are not as focused on educating their legislator, either locally or federally. But if you're going to really get that to change in the Farm Bill, we need to make a concerted effort to say, this is not an issue. Here's how we could regulate the issue, right? Because when when I went to lobby days and we had conversations with, senators and Congress people, they, in every instance, they rarely understand. And when you talk to people outside of our industry, they rarely understand the difference between hemp and marijuana. What is what? Are we just going to get a bunch of chickens high? Are we going to get a bunch of cows high? And it's
You don't get
literally
high when you have
to
your
explain
smoothie, do you?
No.
I know I don't.
And you
there's
have
no
to
THC
explain
in it.
the brass
Right.
tacks that there's no THC. We can produce, no THC products for animal feed and turn that into a great source of food, a sustainable product that we could grow. But it's that simple of, the people who are making those decisions don't understand that difference and what it is or how it would work. And those concerns come back in every conversation. Well, are we going to end up with, THC in the food as a result of the animals eating it? Right.
Right. Well, and if you look, the whole idea of growing a crop, it's just another crop, right? So politicians should be trying to help farmers grow crops, because over the years we've had less and less water to work with. California, Arizona, everywhere in the country, we've got a water problem, right? So we should be looking for crops that use less water. So that's part of that entire concept of helping national security by allowing farmers to do it. And with an industry like cotton, which has been going overseas, this is kind of maybe a little Hail Mary savior for those cotton farmers, right? So supporting that industry is supporting agribusiness, which is, the number one industry of any nation. And I think that's the thing. It's not a, hey, we're growing, this is a hippie thing or anything like that. And I think most of the people in the know at the government has it, but it is kind of a slow process that people get into, right? So,
no, I agree, right? The ability to rotate that additional crop through in what are otherwise large producers of protein and food source. It's just game changer, and if we could get a faster path to it, it would really help farmers to have another product, another crop to rotate through as they grow. And to your point, it needs less water. It's sustainable for the soil. It can be, just scattered on the ground and planted without tilling. So it's a lower carbon if planted right. It can be a really great product.
So if I don't even, be honest with you, I don't really know right now, but in the Farm Bill, I think it's okay for us to grow and sell the seed if you were using it to brew beer, or if you were using it to actually create a powder for people to eat, the hemp hearts, right? That's legal in the U.S. just like Canada. So that part's good. Why we can't do it with animal feed is a little bizarre. You would think they would have used them as the guinea pig before they used us, but this is a question for you, and for anyone really listening. I think that it's around the corner from happening, and that pet food industry is a huge marketplace. And if you can improve the diet of pets, which immediately is done using hemp, and then, of course, using the herd for animal bedding is another great thing to do. But if people are poised to do it, but you were in the dog food space, nothing to do with your legal background, but what's the difference when you're growing a product for human consumption versus for construction? So hemp, we know, it's got fiber that could be great for insulation. All of those, I think they call it the ISP. There's an entire board of people that get the regulations approved and passed, and a lot of things like hempcrete and fiberboard and insulation have been passed, and they're a better product, by the way. They're hypoallergenic, they're breathable, the whole bit, right? So that's happened. But how about when it comes to doing something that has to do with consumption? CBD is consumption related. Hemp seed would be if you're eating it or feeding it to animals. What's the next level of criteria that, like, if I decided to use that for our product, I'd have to get an attorney and ask, hey, how do I handle this? How do I label it? How do I, is it legal?
Yeah.
Can I do this? How do I do it? And what are the safety? That's another thing. Do you have a new criteria? I don't know if it's the USDA or what group comes in to make sure not that your product isn't healthy, but your processing of that product, if somehow got contaminated, so it's a different level of accountability, I guess, when you're doing something that goes in the body of any animal or person, right?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a different level, different law regulated, by the FDA. But the standards for human are different, and so you end up with just different tests, as you noted on CBD. It's a for human consumption. It's also being used for pet consumption. The FDA has you know not taken a stand on it and has pushed back, saying this really isn't for us to regulate, right? So they've left hemp products in a bit of a gray area for a very long time for us to sort of see
Navigate.
what happens. They played a bit of whack-a-mole with, don't make health claims, don't make other references, but made it more challenging from a regulatory perspective, because of the lack of certainty for producers. And I think that's a large part of the problem across the board. As you have this sort of emerging area in hemp, you have a thing that, because the legacy of cannabis in general, as prohibition, you have this. It's not generally recognized as safe, which is a legal standard term that they use to acknowledge foods that otherwise were sort of in existence and we know have a path. And it's created just a lot of challenges for the industry, because we say, well, we're producing this, but the FDA has started to say, you can't have it in food products, you can't have it in beverage products, any of the CBD or hemp derived products. So you only can sell the hemp, but also they're sort of trying to sidestep and not make a definitive guidance on regulating it, which, if we could get more certainty, would help everyone, for sure. So,
Yeah. And so if a client decided to start creating it in the gray area, what would your advice be to them? What would you, because eventually, if it's a matter, now it comes down to having like one regulator in one county in the country that might just be hell-bent, maybe ignorant, and may come in and try to shut that company down. How do you get involved at that point? Do you support the litigation at that point and drive that, or do you give them advice in the first place saying, hey, don't even wait a little bit before you try that avenue?
yeah, I mean, I think we try to help people. One of the challenges of all of it, when you're asked to give legal advice, is legal advice often is black and white. And so you're talking about the area where, the black and white answer is the answer nobody wants to hear, is you probably can't do this. This is not allowed. There's no clear regulatory path, right?
You got
And so,
risk. Yeah.
yeah, you got risk, and you're an entrepreneur in a high risk industry. That's true of everybody in cannabis, from hemp to marijuana.
Well, any
and across the
emerging
board.
industry where the infrastructure is not set, the main players aren't set, But in this particular instance, because that industry has like the history of some issues, going back,
Yeah,
100 years.
yeah. I mean, we end up helping people navigate that and say, look, here's how we think you should do it, or things you absolutely shouldn't do or avoid. I have those conversations all the time. Don't make the health claims on the products you're selling. Be careful about what it is you're doing and how you're selling it. When you are, producing, more of the items we talked about earlier on the fiber side, or just industrial hemp that is not the CBD landscape. It can be a little bit easier because those products aren't, actually being used for human consumption.
Right.
But all of this stuff in that sort of regulatory landscape with the FDA is very much up in the air. And as we see the new version of the Farm Bill come together, continued uncertainty for a lot of our clients and friends in that space. So
what I noticed at the conference is the bigger players, and there's a handful of guys, companies in the U.S. that are what we consider somewhat successful doing this on a larger scale. And but to a T, every one of them was represented at the last conference, and they got up, and what I loved about it was that they were humble, number one, and number two, they were kind of bent in a direction of being more open space. They understood, and you and I talked about this before we started the interview, is that, again, the industry itself has to emerge. So, to a degree, every one of us is stuck logistically in our particular area in the country. Hemp, when you're growing fiber, it's a big thing to move, right? Even after you process it, it's a big thing to move. So logistically, you want to be growing hemp in every region in the country if possible. And so that's a big part of this whole thing, is that these guys come out and they're saying, hey, we need more of it. You've seen other industries. You're involved with craft beer and with the variety, because craft beer over the last 20, 25 years has made a huge surge too. It used to be we had three types of beer in this country and that was it, right? 100 years ago, craft beers that's how it all started. But now it's funny how things kind of go back. But you've seen industries. I look at hemp as being similar to like cell phones, because I was in the phone space when I did VoIP phones and stuff. I look at it like that as well. And technology caught up to a point where cell phones became a viable thing. But at the time, go back 30 years ago, I think not even 30 years ago, I think I had a two-way radio. And I remember having the first brick phone in my car, which made me, by the way, like a superstar. If I was driving down the street and I had that in my hand, wow, he must be somebody, But the whole idea is there's a lot of things that had to come together. And at the time, the idea of a cell phone industry was really a joke, because you needed an infrastructure worldwide that could work on those radio frequencies, and you had to literally have transmitter locations everywhere, and they were multi-millions of dollars, right? So who's to say? At that time, I think other people got into that space, but ultimately the space, like everything else, became commercial, where AT&T, of course, was is the backbone of everything, the whole network, and then you have, now you have different groups out there, Verizon and T-Mobile and all these. So it ended up becoming a commercial thing, whereas the little guy got squeezed out. What do you see the evolution of the hemp industry? This is purely a guess on your part, right? But how do you see that evolving?
Yeah, I make this joke probably too often, but my crystal ball is still pretty cloudy. If I were better at predicting the future of industry or seeing the next thing, like Uber, Lyft, Amazon, Google, gosh, there's so many things in the last 30 years. If I were better at predicting those, maybe I would have stayed an entrepreneur instead of doing the boring gig of being a lawyer.
But do you see any?
Just to go back and answer the question, other than that is to say, I don't totally know. I think if you start to think of corollaries for hemp, and I think the VoIP or cell phone space is not a great similar industry to look at. I think you can look at other food products and agriculture and all of that. When you start to look at consumer packaged goods and agriculture and the items you can produce out of hemp, there's probably a pretty clear space and a way the market lands, right? that said, there's also so much opportunity still in this being a sustainable product and being able to develop, fiberboard and cardboard and plastics and food products and animal bedding. I think as you continue to see the industry go, there will be a sustainable place and a place that just continues to fit for hemp in the market, as a food product, as an ag product, as an industrial supply for some of those large players. And I agree and hope that we can help regulatory and government get in the mindset of how do we get there to help this industry continue to provide that great resource of things. And so I think I see that in the future, and I'm hopeful for. I've continued to for over a decade of working with cannabis clients and folks in this industry. I love supporting the hemp industry. We continue to support NOCO and the folks meeting up in the industry, because I'm a believer in sort of what that means for providing these great products for the world, made out of a very cool sustainable ag product. So yeah.
Yeah, the reason I use the cell phone industry is because for cell phones to work, you needed to build this big infrastructure. Total different industry, the cell phone industry or the VoIP phone, except 20 plus years ago, the idea of having cell phones deployed in everyone's pocket worldwide is unfathomable. The idea of how much money had to be spent on infrastructure. And it's the same thing with hemp. We can, once we figure out the seed thing, right, then farmers can grow it. And then, of course, there has to be offtake. It has to be people buying it and using it. So that part has to be put together. But the biggest thing is infrastructure. All of this stuff has to be processed. You have to process. The seed's not hard to process because people have been processing cottonseed and every other seed for years. So that's not the issue. But the plant itself, the fiber, which is for textiles, and the herd, which can be used for a lot of different products, there has to be in a local area, localized. This is the problem. You can't grow it in Washington and send it to Alabama. Not feasible, right? Because you're talking about, millions of tons, trucks. Right? So you have to build that infrastructure. That's the part but my whole point is it happened. The demand was strong enough for cell phones that it happened. Technologies came together also to improve the cell phone throughout that process. So you had that whole serendipity of different technology improvements that created this thing we all now we curse, right? We all have a cell phone, and the world has gotten smaller. We can't hide anymore, you know. But I look at it from that standpoint, the hemp industry, from where that is. Another place to look at it would be electric vehicles, because electric vehicles, I think it's pretty much anybody. I don't know. I drive an electric vehicle. I have for almost 10 years. But once you start driving an electric vehicle, the idea of going back to a fossil fuel, where I have to go to a gas station, not going to happen.
Gas in it, change the
having
oil.
my oil changed, and sorry, you can fix most of it overnight while I'm sleeping. I'm not going back to it. It's a simple. But that being said, taking a trip across the country and feeling like there's a gas station or an electric charger everywhere, that's a little scarier. But we know that it's emerging. We know these charging stations are coming around. We also know that, the type of charger, they're having adapters. So if you're driving a Tesla, you've got an adapter if you want to go to driving a Rivian or whatever, or vice versa. Again, it's where the industry comes together.
Universal standards.
Yeah, and I think that happens with a lot of, with cell phones and everything else, having adapters, having the ability to take headphones or whatever, plug-and-play products that work. There had to be a certain amount of cooperation. And if you try to create this big silo platform, you're the one who's going to die, right, on the vine. So
Yeah.
that's why I say, hemp in particular is got those particular challenges.
No, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think absolutely there are some key steps along the way to processing and development that will have to be accomplished. I'm pretty excited about you know uh, one of our clients, the winner of the NOCO hemp pitch contest, uh, is developing a way to do decortication. Right, there are these key steps of you have to be able to take the important pieces of the plant as you need them and process it, and that needs to be in an infrastructure way universally done. And to your point, can't be done in all in Alabama. It has to be done on site or at each location.
Right. And that's
maybe in
expensive.
20
It's an
micro
expensive
sites, but
process. Right.
there is an expense there. Yeah.
So I guess if once you get into that space, you become a believer. I think you probably are a believer, but we're all cautious. Will this thing stall for 5 years or 10 years? And I think the big players, who eventually will probably control the industry, right? But I think those players
Yeah.
sit on the sidelines waiting for, it to become clearer and, for an infrastructure to be built. I think there's a lot, I don't know what you see, but we talk about investment strategies and fund formation, and that's part of what you do. So
Yeah.
how do you see funding? Are banks funding for this industry now? They weren't jumping on board with THC-related products for a while. There's a few banks that do it. But how do you see funding? Because this is basic agriculture. But it's not. It's not quite basic agriculture because the system's not quite in place where there's a commodity value and a buyer for this and a grower for that. So how do you see
Yeah.
this the investment thing going?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. There's a lot of private money still, but even some of the private money is very, selective in what they're investing in and being thoughtful about that. The banks and sort of large institutions are mostly still waiting and watching, standing on the sidelines, waiting for more banking and regulatory clarity. In hemp, there are plenty of banks that will do deposits, but even as soon as you start to get into lending and finance, it can be more challenging. There are a few great banks who are out there doing loans, doing work, but the widespread access to capital that if I went in and said I'm starting a dairy farm or I want to plant corn is not the same for the hemp industry for sure.
Right. Yeah.
And it is one of the keys, a safer banking, whatever the next round of that looks like, getting something on that side through to make it really clear to allow access to capital will be a watershed moment and a helpful moment for exactly that, for building out this infrastructure that you need to really make the industry go.
Right. Everyone wants to get in on a ground floor of that, like you said, electric cars or Google or Uber or something. We all want to get on the ground floor. We were all alive, by the way, when those industries started, and we all say, well, why didn't we invest, right? But
Yeah.
it's the same business dynamics that any investor is challenged with in any point in history, anywhere in the world, right? There's the same dynamics that, are you betting on a sure thing or not? Once it becomes a sure thing, your return on investment goes down here, but your risk, if it's not a sure thing, is up here. So, do you are you working with any of these bigger private funds or anything like that? Are you on the lookout for? Do you see companies that you think might emerge from the space that are good investments for some of this private money?
Yeah, we definitely do work with funds and investors in the space who are actively looking and considering options. I spend a good amount of my nighttime side hustle. We aren't an investment bank. We're lawyers, so we don't
Right.
help people actually raise capital. But I spend a good amount of sort of my nighttime side hustle trying to connect the right people to the right people, right? So investors who are looking and companies who are working together, how can I help them find one another? There are people who are interested. I think your comment about, a lot of the players are waiting and watching. There is a bit of, some of the big players are waiting and watching, but there are also plenty of passionate, family office or high net worth people who get the idea, get the prospect, and say, I'm all in. I want to figure out how we do this. And so there is a lot of interest trying to figure out how do we get over that next hurdle to get there.
So yeah, I think generally investors, qualified investors, want solid business fundamentals. So they're investing in someone who's been in business, who understands business, and because there's nothing worse than investing in a great idea. That's what I found out. Invest in a solid idea. Invest in one that has maybe not quite as great a return on investment, but has less risk. And I think those are the two things that investors look for. But anyway, it's great
Yeah.
talking to you. We're trying to keep
Yeah.
everything within this time frame. And I appreciate the time you've given us, and I'm sure you and I will
Thank
see
you,
each
Mike.
other again, David. And the idea of having a place for people to get help, because ultimately you need a CPA and you need an attorney to navigate through just even normal business startups, whatever it is, but especially in some of these industries we're talking about. So you're providing a good service. Hopefully you're picking clients.
My
who
pleasure.
can
I love doing
pay
it.
the
I
bills.
love getting a chance to help people with their new idea and help them get it off the ground, find that path. And especially in this industry, it's just, it's super fun every day to come and help people solve those problems. So love
All
doing
right.
it. Really enjoyed. Thank you so
So
much for having
I'm
me.
going to summarize and get the name right. So it's David DiGiacomo.
DiGiacomo. DiGiacomo.
It's the C that I was getting wrong. The DiGiacomo. With
There you go.
Michael
Perfect.
Best and Friedrich. Appreciate your time. How much do you have to correct people like me? Is it a constant thing, or it
Yeah,
takes them a
every
little
day.
while?
Yeah, every day. In the days when we had telemarketers, that was the telltale sign that it wasn't somebody who knew me. Hi, I'm looking for Mr. Digi, and they would pause like you did, and you'd be like, not here. So
Right.
it was the perfect call screener.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it's a tricky name. I'm always trying to help people navigate it. So
Yeah,
too many
yeah.
vowels in our Italian last names.
Yeah. Well, it's all right to be unique. That's what you got to look at it. But all right. Well, I do appreciate your time, and I'm sure you and I will be in touch with our company at some point too. And we do have another podcast coming soon with a banker, that's in the space too. So
Yeah.
we're talking about that, those service providers that are critical and needed in any business. So I appreciate your time, and
That's awesome.
and
Look
good luck
forward
with
to
your
talking.
ventures as well. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.